Welcome to our presentation, Developing a Behaviorally Anchored Assessment for Critical Thinking, Becoming the Queen by Dr. Barry Boyd and Dr. Jennifer Strong from Texas A&M University. So why is critical thinking so important? Well, first of all, the moral purpose of education is to prepare students with those skills that will enable them to be productive contributors after they graduate from college. Employers expect colleges and universities to prepare work-ready graduates, and among the skills that they look for is the ability to think critically and solve problems. From the American Association of Colleges and Universities annual study of employers, we found that more than 3/4 of employers want colleges to place more emphasis on key learning outcomes such as critical thinking and complex problem solving. Yet only about 26% of those employers actually feel that graduates have these essential skills. Critical thinking, according to Fascioni, is a purposeful, self-regulatory judgment that results in an interpretation, analysis, evaluation, and inferences, as well as an explanation of all of the evidence, the conceptual models, the methodology, the criteriological, and the contextual considerations upon which that judgment is based. It's a pretty in-depth thing when we think about critical thinking. The purpose of this study was to create a behaviorally anchored, competency-based critical thinking assessment that faculty could use in the classroom to not only enhance undergraduate students' critical thinking ability, but to improve their teaching of critical thinking. This assessment tool was designed for use in the classroom to assess critical thinking behaviors of students through examining their assignments and observing how they behave in the classroom. Some definitions are in order here so that we're all on the same page. Let's start with behavioral anchors. These are defined as characteristics of core competencies that are associated with the mastery of that content. Competency-based behavioral anchors are those performance capabilities needed to demonstrate that a student has that knowledge, skill, or ability. Behaviorally anchored and competency-based models are a lot more accurate in assessing skills gained because they look for specific behaviors that are tied to each of the competencies that you're looking at. And furthermore, such anchors provide teachers and other expert raters with behavioral information that's useful not only in assessing students, but in providing feedback to them. Our study used a grounded theory approach. A review and analysis of the literature regarding critical thinking behaviors was done as a complement to the data collected from the modified Delphi study. A modified Delphi study was also done. A Delphi study, as you know, uses a panel of experts in a given topic to develop a consensus of opinion regarding the answers to either a specific question or series of questions. We chose our panel of experts because they were experts in teaching critical thinking and they had conducted and published extensive research in the field of critical thinking, or they had published books on the topic. In round one of the study, we asked these 5 specific questions. What behaviors do students demonstrate when they are thinking critically? And what behaviors do they demonstrate when they are not thinking critically? How do you assess critical thinking in the classroom? How do you think faculty are trained in critical thinking as compared to how do you think faculty should be trained in critical thinking? Round 2 consisted of all of the summarized and clarified answers from round 1 for each question. The statements were clarified and sent from the entire panel and then were sent back to the panel, and they were asked to determine the level to which they agreed with each of these answers on a 6-point Likert type scale. In round 3, we took all of the statements from round 2 that received a score of either 5 or 6 from 2/3 of the experts. And we retained those in round 3 and then sent those back out to the experts to reevaluate these statements for each question and respond again using the same 6-point Likert type scale. Consensus was reached in this 3rd round. Completion of the Delphi and content analysis process gave us a multitude of data chunks. We used operational model diagramming to pictorially represent the key themes and give us a visual representation of how those themes intertwined. As we categorized those themes, they fell into 5 groups. And after further refining these groups, we named each group based on the types of questions that were in them. And the groups ended up being called questioning behaviors, understanding behaviors, behaviors related to evaluation, behaviors related to being able to explain how you came to those decisions and how you made certain decisions or came to certain conclusions. And the last category is called neoteric, which is a nice big fancy word for saying that leaders are open to new ideas and they seek for and try to create new ideas. And we noticed after naming these that interestingly, the acronym QUEEN came out of these. And so we found that using this acronym with students actually helps them remember the 5 categories of critical thinking behaviors. So let's take a few moments and explore the behaviors that fall within each of these 5 categories. So good thinkers ask questions. This is something I tell my students at the beginning of every semester. If you aren't asking questions, then you aren't thinking about this information the way you should be. This category has 4 behaviors. So good thinkers ask questions that clarify. They ask questions that clarify what is the purpose, what is the outcome we're seeking, as an example, how will supporting this issue impact my followers versus how will not supporting this issue impact my followers. They seek to find and state the critical questions to the problem we're trying to solve and figure out what is the main question of an issue. Really, what are we trying to get to? What is our main objective here? Important questions they ask are about their own perceptions, their own points of view, and those of the other people involved in the decision-making process. The next category was understanding. What is the purpose of what we're trying to do? Or what is the purpose of what this other group is trying to do? Or what is the purpose of the author of the book we're reading? They seek to understand the context in which the decision is being made. If you think about the decisions made regarding COVID-19, it's very helpful to understand the context in which those decisions were made at that time. Decisions being made right now are much different than decisions being made nearly 3 months ago. They also seek to understand alternative points of view, understanding that their viewpoint may be very limited, may be very narrow due to experience and things like that. So they seek out alternative viewpoints and they examine their assumptions and the assumptions that other people may be making. We've always been told that assumptions are bad. You never want to make assumptions, but assumptions are actually a critical part of making good decisions. You have to sometimes assume certain information because we have gaps in the knowledge that we have. And then good thinkers look for accurate and relevant information, which leads us really to this next category, which is evaluating information. Good thinkers use information to make decisions, but in doing that, they have to judge the credibility of the sources. And again, I can go back to COVID-19. We had information that we were using to make decisions from very unreliable sources, and some of those sources even lied to us. So it's really important to judge the credibility of those sources and what information from those sources, what is relevant to what we're trying to solve. They use that information to draw their conclusions. They identify the consequences of their decisions. I often think that leaders make decisions without really looking at the consequences, or they only look at the short-term consequences. They don't look at the long-term consequences. They examine assumptions of themselves and others, and they listen to and seek out other points of view. They also do a good job of distinguishing between fact and value claims in the information they're assessing. A fact claim would be to say that Eli Manning is the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. That's a fact because we can look at quarterback salaries, we can look at their ranking, we can see that he is paid the highest salary in the NFL. A value claim would be to say that Eli Manning is the best quarterback in the NFL. That is a value claim unless we can back that up with some type of criteria and data that would then turn that into a fact claim. And once leaders have made a decision, they have that ability to explain how they came to those conclusions. They can defend and justify their conclusions and their positions. They can show that they attempted to create alternative solutions using examples as ways of explaining that. Not only using examples, but using illustrations that help people see how they came to their decisions. They can explain their reasoning. And one of the ways that they can explain their reasoning is using models and frameworks to explain. They can say that they used a decision-making model such as Kidder's ethical checkpoints, or they used Kirkpatrick's model of learning evaluation. But by utilizing these models, it ensures that a complete process was gone through and critical information was not missed and not considered, and that our assumptions and things like that were examined. Finally, good thinkers, those who are good at critical thinking, are good at synthesizing and looking for new solutions and ideas. They don't always go with the way we've always done it or what seems plausible or possible, but they're really good at promoting new concepts and saying, let's try something different. They're very open-minded about these new concepts, and that's often a very difficult thing to be. It's probably one of the most difficult things I've seen students try to engage in, is to be open-minded and to look outside their realm of experience. And then neoteric thinkers also engage in self-examination. Self-examination means they examine their own biases, both implicit and explicit biases. They look at their own experiences to see how those things are influencing their decision-making process, and that makes better leaders, better thinkers. As leadership educators, we know that self-reported data has its limitations, and that's why this behaviorally anchored measure of critical thinking we feel like a much better way of examining and looking at how students exhibit critical thinking. It allows instructors as well as student peers to actually see the critical thinking of students through behaviors, and gives that instructor legitimate and concrete behaviors that they can train for, and then they can also use to see, here's where the skills and gaps are in my students' critical thinking, and I can train specifically for those gaps in their skills. As part of this continuing study, we are also running some experimental design studies that test the impact of teaching these behaviors from the Queen model as both a one-shot leadership training and as a course-long application using control groups to see which method is most effective for instruction. For leadership educators, teaching the behaviors from this Queen model to new students and then reinforcing these concepts throughout the leadership curriculum, we believe will give students the ability to stand out in a crowded job landscape and be those industry leaders that we know they become. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact Barry Boyd or Jennifer Strong at the email below, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have and demonstrate this model to you.